The MTA runs New York City subways, buses, and commuter trains that 6 million people rely on each weekday. And on Monday, board members approved close to a $2 billion contract to expand the 2nd Avenue subway line into East Harlem. Jay Patel is the CFO of the MTA. She's charged with quite the task, which I think is fair to say many would find unenviable, charting a sustainable path through one of the agency's most financially trying periods in its 6-decade history. She joins us here in the Bloomberg Businessweek studio. Jay, welcome. How are you?
I'm good. How are you, Tim? Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us. I want to start with the numbers and just ridership here. Weekday subway ridership is still 25% below pre-COVID levels. In your modeling, does that ever come back to where it was?
We have a financial plan that's a 5-year period, and originally we were projecting that we would see our subway ridership up to 90%, but a couple of years ago we revised that because we weren't seeing that, but we're hopeful we see an 80% by 2029 ridership recovery for subways. But on the railroads, we're seeing that recovery even higher today. We see 85% ridership recovery on our railroads, which is amazing, something that we thought was going to be slower, our railroad customers, than our subway customers originally coming out of pre-pandemic.
So is there a way to tap into that growth financially, perhaps with higher prices for those commuters rather than here in the city for subway and bus riders?
So, what we have is very small, predictable fare increases that help balance the financial plan. And so we don't want to burden one rider over another. It's really about distance-based and commuters. And so we keep that equitable. You know that we do a 2% fare increase every other year, and that keeps our financial plan in balance.
How do you plan to get that number? I think you said 80% ridership. How do you bring people back into the subways?
We bring riders back by providing reliable on-time performance, right? Our service matters to customers, and delivering the service that we promise and schedule is something that we strive for, but also safety. Our customers need to feel safe, and our customers feel that, right? We've had the lowest safety numbers or crime numbers in July, and so our customers are telling us that by taking the subway, but also our customer surveys, right, tell us that customers are satisfied with the service that we're providing.
The MTA faces a combined $1.1 billion deficit over 3 years starting in 2027. It already owes close to $50 billion. It needs to spend $68 billion more for vital improvements. There's some federal aid that's up in the air. The Trump administration is trying to roll back congestion pricing. What's the backup plan if the aid evaporates and the president is successful in rolling back congestion pricing?
Tim, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that back in 2023, we were the first transit agency to solve our fiscal cliff. Thanks to Governor Hochul, Chair Lieber, and the legislature, we were able to come out of a deficit unlike any other transit agency today. You've heard SEPTA is facing deep cuts, Chicago, but we were the first to say we need state, federal, and local aid, and we got our state federal funding for us. We also, as the MTA, contributing to our solving our deficit, right? The MTA contributes $500 million to its operating efficiencies. And those deficits that we have in 27 and 28 and 29 are very small compared to our operating budget. And we are committed to doing our part in saving money to help ensure that we can balance our budget in the out years.
We were talking a little bit about the base fares of subways increasing regularly. I'm wondering if is there a set area within the MTA that revenue goes toward? Because the base fare for a subway in New York City, it's expected to increase to $3 in January.
Correct. So our fares help our operating budget, right? So 70% of MTA's costs are labor and fringe, and so that pays for 70,000 employees, and then the small fraction is for the non-labor contracts. So every fare contributes to operating cost on our side.
Let's talk about fares and fare evasion. Usually when we talk fare evasion, I think of people jumping over subway turnstiles, and I know there have been some mitigation efforts in place, but I took the bus to LaGuardia on Thursday. It was a great experience, but when I got on the SBS in Queens, it was like an articulated bus, so it was a long one. I got on in the back, And out of like more than half a dozen people, I think I was the only one who paid. And I was thinking to myself, I didn't know it was optional to pay to get on the bus. What are the numbers there?
So it's not optional, right, to pay the fare. We are encouraging every customer to pay their fair share to
But there's no
the
enforcement
MTA.
on the bus.
So there's a couple of things that we're doing for fare evasion, and our chair has been tackling this first when he became chair. So on the subways, you've heard of us talking about we're doing fins, sleeves, gate guards, enforcing the exit gate, which is the fare, evasion highway. And so we've made great strides on the subways. We've reduced fare evasion in over a year by 30%. We've dropped that rate from a high of 14% to 9.8%. So we know those efforts are working. On the buses, it's a little bit more difficult, but we're also working there. We've decreased fare evasion on our buses as well in the last year from 50% to 44% because of all the tactics the president of New York City Transit is employing. We have Eagle teams that are on different bus routes to make sure that they are enforcing the pay your fare, right? Our bus operators do their due diligence, but really our Eagle teams are enforcement out there riding different routes and making sure customers pay their fare, or they're getting a summons, or they're getting off the bus. And that's how we're working towards that.
How does that work? Because I heard of a friend who was on a bus and someone had come around and like scanned their phone to see if they had paid the fare. Is that how it works? Explain to us.
So right now, what we are doing is if you're boarding the bus, you have to pay because there's two different ways you can pay, right? Today is the Metro card and the Omni. And when we go to full Omni next year, there's going to be proof of payment. And so what you can do is European style proof of payment for customers is you can tap their phones or credit cards, the method of payment to see if they paid their fare. And if they didn't pay their fare, that's something that we'll work with on a summons, or, you need to pay your fare for our customer. And so that's something that's coming. We're really excited about that for Omni and proof of payment. But right now there's two different methods. And so we're working on different ways to combat fare evasion.
I want to talk a little bit about proposals from mayoral candidates. Zohran Mamdani, for example, his proposal to make all New York City buses free. What do you think of that? And does it create a sort of a two-tiered mass transit system where people who ride buses don't pay for it, but then people who ride the subway do, and that kind of offset like people not necessarily taking the right mode of transit for their destination?
So we've heard the mayoral candidates' proposal for fare-free buses. What I'd like to emphasize again is fare box revenue is important to the operations of the MTA. It's 26% of our revenue. And buses is about $1 billion in the out years of revenue for the MTA bus. For the MTA, excuse me. And that's important to us. And so we want to make sure revenues equal service. And that is something that's a hypothetical right now, but we rely on fare box revenue.
So you said $1 billion in revenue is what it brings in. Mamdani estimates that's about $750 million annually to make buses free. Is that an accurate assessment on his part?
I think there's pieces that he's looking at just the New York City Transit bus fare. We have MTA Bus that we also run that the city contributes to, and that is also fare box revenue for buses.
So what would taking away that revenue from the MTA do to the authority's finances? Or would it just be, I mean, look, again, it's a proposal. You said it's something that, is not a plan yet.
Yes.
But to be fair, he is by far the favored candidate. And there are a lot of questions about what power he has to actually follow through with a campaign promise such as this. But this is certainly a central part of his campaign. So you got to be looking at it closely.
We are looking at it. But one thing that I would like to emphasize, right now in New York City, fares are affordable. We make transit and buses the most affordable at $2.90. And it's affordable with fair fares, reduced fare for our customers. But, it is something that we will look into as the mayoral candidate has proposed.